When I did the tomato trellis video a few months back, I got a lot of requests to see how they turned out once the plants had grown and the tomatoes were ready. It's now that time. So the tomatoes are pretty much ready to start being picked, or at least the first batch. And the trellises I made earlier in the spring actually ended up working pretty well. They haven't come apart, and they are actually a fairly good size. They could have been maybe a little bit bigger, but actually the size was about right. I like to grow a lot of tomatoes and then can them for the rest of the year. I find canning my own tastes much better than buying the stuff from the store. And so for making basically tomato sauce, the flavor is just much better. And it's nice to grow your own. So I kind of plant a bunch of different varieties, and I'm not very good at keeping track of which are which. So I end up with a whole bunch of tomatoes of all different kinds of shapes. So I don't really know what I have. I think most of them are somewhat common varieties, but pretty much any tomato is good for sauce. That's what I've always found. So now I'll start processing the tomatoes. You know what, I just remembered I need to wash these. So I'm gonna wash these. They shouldn't be dirty really, they just might have dust on them from being outside. I didn't spray them with anything, so it's just whatever's in the air is on them. So I will process these down by cutting off whatever bits I don't want and cutting them into somewhat small pieces, not too small. Some of these have really weird shapes, but I guess that makes them taste good. Mostly the cutting in half is mostly to break the skin, so the liquid will come out and there'll be something to boil. Now, I used to do this where I would put these in the food processor and I'd make a sauce and I would boil that down and then I would freeze it, and that's how I'd store it, and I would have sort of ready-made sauce. But I found it's quicker. I can just not puree them and just cut them up and just boil them, and it's almost the same once they're boiled. And I really like them with the seeds and the skin and all that stuff, so I just put them in with everything. Now we can turn the stove on. I can kind of mash them a little bit, get some of the liquid out. You need something to boil or they'll just fry on the bottom. So I haven't really found that I need to add any water. So these tomatoes with the green on the top, from what I've heard, commercial tomatoes, this has been bred out so that they're just orange or red all over. They sort of look better. But actually these older varieties with the green allow the tomato to get more sugar in it. So the flavors actually, at least this is what I've heard, it may be just an urban myth, but that the older varieties with the green on the top like this have more flavor. So it will start to froth and make a lot of foam, I've found. And it will boil over and make a huge mess all over the place. But the trick I figured out to break the foam is to add a little bit of fat or oil. So I add a little bit of olive oil. And that will keep the foam down. So we're getting close. I think we'll let it cook down a little more. This is about how broken up the tomatoes get, but it's still a little wet. Needs to get a little thicker. So I have this big canning pot, and it's used to boil the jars. Okay, so now is where we fill the jars with the sauce. And we need to keep the jars sterile. That's all we want in the jars is the sauce. We don't want any germs in the jars. So I've boiled the jars, and now I'll pour the water out, and I'll fill the jars with the sauce, and I'll make sure the rim is clean, and I'll put the lids on, and then I'll put the jar back in the water, and we'll boil it for another like 15 minutes or so, and that'll sort of process it. I think that's what it's called. It kills anything that might have gotten in there. Then you just let them cool off, and they should last for a year or more and stay fresh and safe. If you've done this all properly, the cooling and shrinking of the air between the sauce and the lid will cause the lid to snap down and create a very good seal. Thanks for watching.